Okay, Matthew chapter 24. You know, I really didn't intend to carry this over tonight, but as I started talking about it this morning, it's been a little bit longer on the first half than I originally intended to. But that's okay, because I love Matthew chapter 20. I love this discourse of Jesus, and if you were here this morning, I told you, it is one of the most misunderstood passages in all of the New Testament. Most people see Matthew chapter 24 as all about the second coming of Jesus and the signs of the second coming of Jesus and all of that. And we took a look at the first part of it, really the first 33 verses. We kind of took an overview of. And I don't have the time, in case you weren't here this morning, I'm so sorry about it. I really don't have the time to get into a lot of detail, but I do want to give about a 5-minute summary. I pointed out a couple of things that you just need to remember that are really important, or if you weren't here, you need to take note of these things. The first thing is, at the very beginning of Matthew chapter 24, in verse 1, the disciples come up to Jesus, the 12 come up to Jesus, and they point out to him the temple buildings. Now, apparently they were interested, they were drawing Jesus' attention to the majesty of God's house. In verse 2, I said Jesus drops a bomb on him. And the bomb he drops on him is he says, well, I'm telling you, there's coming a time when not one stone is going to be left on another of the temple buildings that he was showing, that they were pointing out in. That's the statement that initiates this whole discussion. Jesus tells them there's coming a time when the temple that you're showing me, that temple is going to be gone. It's going to be completely destroyed. Don't forget, that's the statement that initiated the whole conversation. Well, in verse 3, if you look at verse 3, the disciples come back and they ask Jesus a question. Based on the question that they asked him, we know, as they've gotten together to try to figure out what in the world Jesus is talking about, they came to their own conclusion. And we know what conclusion they came to based on the question that they asked him. Now again in verse 2, the only statement Jesus made to them was, yeah, there's coming a time when the temple is going to be completely destroyed. Not one stone's going to be left on another. That's all Jesus said. They came back in verse 3 and they said to him, take a look at it, tell us, when will these things happen? Well, why? The destruction of the temple. That's what he told them was going to happen. When will these things happen? When is the temple going to be destroyed? But they added this. And what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? Now Jesus didn't say anything about his coming at the end of the age. He didn't say anything about that at all. All he was talking about was the destruction of the temple. But based on the question they asked him, we get a sense of what they concluded. They concluded that the temple is going to be destroyed at the end of the age. And you can kind of understand where they came to that conclusion. It's God's house. It's where God dwells among his people. And so they couldn't conceive of the notion that the temple was going to be gone and everything else was going to keep going. That just didn't compute to them. If God's house was gone, everything must be gone. And so that's what they decided. So tell us what will these things be, the destruction of the temple, and what are the signs of your coming to the end of the age? Well, what they really don't know is they've asked two questions. Because the temple wasn't going to be destroyed at the end of the age. The temple was going to be destroyed long before the end of the age. And so Jesus is going to deal with those two questions separately. Now with that said, the key to understanding, and I said that this morning, I said the key to understanding this passage, this chapter, which is so wildly misunderstood, is verse 34 and verse 36. Now, I told you, if you like to write in the margin of your Bible, beside the verse 34, there's two words that I would encourage you to write down in the margin. Time text. It is the time text, because in that verse 34, Jesus says, when everything that he has just told them, in verse 34, he tells them when all that's going to happen. So look at verse 34 again. If you weren't here this morning, Jesus says, truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. So everything that he has said up to verse 34, Jesus says specifically, it's going to take place during that present generation. Jesus' contemporaries, during the life of Jesus' contemporaries. Take a look at it again. Let that verse say what it says. Say what it says. Listen, there's an important principle of Bible study. I want you to always remember this. Usually, generally, unless there's something in the context that overwhelmingly suggests you should approach it a different way, generally speaking, let the words of the Bible say what they say. Okay? Let them say what they say. The most natural, the most straightforward understanding. And when Jesus says, truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. And so he's talking about the destruction of the temple. He's answering the first part of the question. He's answering the question that was initiated by his statement that the temple is going to be destroyed. What will these things be? It's going to be in that generation. Well, did it actually happen during that generation? It sure did. It's a historical fact. No one argues against it that in 70 AD, the Roman army came to town and they leveled Jerusalem and the temple was no more. And the temple has not existed since 70 AD. On that platform in Jerusalem where the temple once existed, there is an Islamic shrine that was built in the 7th century. It's called the Dome of the Rock. It has a golden dome on it. You've seen pictures of it. You've probably seen it in the news. In fact, there was another flashpoint there just a few days ago in Israel. The temple hasn't been there since 70 AD. During the time of the lifespan of the people to whom Jesus was speaking. So it's a historical fact. Jesus said. It shows the prophetic, Jesus as what he is. He's God in the flesh. And he knew that the temple was going to be destroyed during that generation. Now, the last thing that I want to point out that we look at this morning is look at some of the things that he said in chapter 24, in the first half of it, that only makes sense if he's talking about the destruction of the temple. It only makes sense if he's talking about the second coming. Like, for instance, we said in verse 15, therefore, when you see the abomination that causes desolation standing in the holy place, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, in verse 16. And we looked at Luke's account of it in Luke chapter 21 and verse 20, where Luke said this, when you see armies surrounding Jerusalem, know that her desolation is near, and then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. We said this morning, he was talking about the second coming of Jesus Christ fleeing to the mountains. It's going to help him. And then he goes on to say things like this. Verse 19, woe to those who are pregnant, and woe to those who are nursing babies in those days. If that's talking about the second coming of Jesus Christ, as I said this morning, what does it matter if you're pregnant? And what does it matter if you have little babies that you're nursing? It doesn't matter at all. But it matters a great deal if you are trying to escape from a conquering army. It's going to be tough for women in that condition. And then he says to them in verse 22, or verse 21, verse 20, pray that your flight will not be in the winter or on the Sabbath. Pray that you're not getting away during the winter or during the Sabbath. Again, if it's talking about the second coming of Jesus Christ, it doesn't matter what day of the week it is, and it doesn't matter what season it is. That's meaningless. But it does matter if you're trying to escape from an army. And because on the Sabbath day, they couldn't expect any kind of help from surrounding communities. If it's in the winter, travel's very difficult. It's the rainy season. Things turn to mud. And so all of these things Jesus is saying here only make sense if he's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. Remember, that's the statement that initiated this whole thing. Jesus, look at the buildings of the temple. Well, I'm telling you, there's coming a time when not one stone is going to be left on another. Tell us when will these things be. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until everything that I said to you take place. The time has. Now with that said, here's where we left off this morning. I said, but if you look at verse 29 through verse 31, it sure looks like that's talking about the second coming of Jesus. But that comes before verse 34, the time text. I just said the time text, I take it at its face value. Jesus says, This generation will not pass away until everything that I've just said to you takes place. But how do you explain verse 29, verse 31? Surely that's talking about the second coming of Jesus. Let's take a look at it. I'm going to read it first of all. But immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of heaven will be shaken. And then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. And he will send forth his angels with a great trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. Well, surely that's a reference to the second coming of Jesus. No, it's not. It's not a reference to the second coming of Jesus. Well, how can you be so sure? First of all, because of the time text. Verse 34. That's the key to understanding this. Jesus has just said, this generation is not going to pass away until everything that he said prior to this takes place. Okay. Well, let's take a look at it. It sure sounds like second coming language. What do you mean, though, that it's not second coming language? Well, let's take a look. The first thing that I want you to do is I want you to look at verse 29 and see these words. Two words that I want you to focus on that are in the New American Standard Translation, probably in yours as well. But immediately after the tribulation of those days. That expression, those days. Now, I've circled that in my Bible, those days, because those two words connect what he's saying right now with the verses that have gone on before this. What I mean by that is this. I want you to look at verse 19. But woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days. All right? Now, I've circled that. And then he goes on to say in verse 22, unless those days had been cut short, no life would have been saved those days. I've circled that. And then at the end of verse 22, but for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. And then he gets to verse 29 and he says, immediately after the tribulation of those days. Those days, those days, those days. That links everything that he's saying in verse 29 to 31 that sure looks like second coming language. It's linked to those days that he's talking about when he says, woe to those women who are pregnant in those days. It's going to be awful. So, first of all, that expression links all of this together. But what I want you to see in verse 29 to 31 is this, and I'm going to walk you through this. It's not a reference to the second coming of Jesus Christ. It is language about the coming judgment of God, not the end of time judgment. When we talk about the judgment of God, what we often think about is the end of time. Like there's this one moment in all of history when God comes in judgment, and that's at the end of the age. That's not true. God has come in judgment a lot during human history. There's been time after time after time, and nation after nation after nation that have been on the receiving end of God's judgment because of their rebellion. Israel's been on the receiving end of God's judgment time and time again. We just think about their history. We think about when the kingdom of Israel split into the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. In the northern kingdom, all the kings who lived in the northern kingdom, they were awful. They led the people into rebellion. They were stubborn and they were obstinate. Finally, God came in judgment in the northern kingdom in 722 AD when he brought the Assyrians to him, and the northern kingdom was wiped off the face of the earth. That was God coming in judgment. And then God came in judgment on the southern kingdom, Judah, in 586. In their rebellion, God begs and he pleads with them, please turn back to me. Give yourself back to me, your heart, your lives. If you don't, I'm going to judge you. And they just continued to reject God, and he came in judgment in 586. Came to town, the Babylonians this time. And so all throughout history, God has always interacted with human beings and nations, and sometimes he's judged them. One of the things that you're going to see in the Old Testament time and time again, when God comes in judgment, this is the language that he uses. This is just great, normal, Old Testament language of the judgment of God. Now let me explain the judgment that's going to happen here. When the temple is destroyed in 70 AD, it is an act of God's judgment. One of the things that has happened when Jesus came, the Jewish establishment, as you know, has completely rejected Jesus. And so what we're seeing here is they have rejected Jesus as the Messiah. He's not the chosen servant. He's not the chosen one. He's not the one that God has said was coming to redeem His people. He's none of that. And what God is going to do, He is going to vindicate Jesus Christ. And He is going to come in judgment on the nation of Israel. And this is the moment that He is coming in. The destruction of the temple was in part judgment on the Jewish nation for their rejection of Jesus Christ. So it shouldn't surprise us then that He uses this language of judgment. Now let me show you what I mean. Get ready. Let's turn to the Old Testament. Let's work our way through some Old Testament books. First place I want you to turn is Isaiah. So I want you to turn to Isaiah chapter 13. Isaiah chapter 13. By the way, one of the things, people ask me this all the time. They'll say to me, listen, how do you remember all of these verses? And if I really want to try to impress them, I just say, well, I'm something of a genius. And I just hear a verse one time, and I never, ever, ever forget it. It's like a photographic memory. Now, how many of you believe that? Seriously? Thank you so much. Thank you. You are so sweet. It breaks my heart to tell me you are wrong. Oh, I remember things because I write them down. I just write things down. Now, let me just kind of detour. I know this isn't a course on how to study your Bible, but let me encourage you. Please write in your Bibles. You can't remember everything. You can't. It's impossible. And so one of the things when people ask me, and they ask me this all the time, about getting a Bible. I want a new Bible. And one of the things I always say, and you can get these things, I say, I really strongly recommend a wide margin Bible so that you can write things down. I just want to kind of show you, and I know all of you can't see, but can you see how everything, I just scribble. I mean, my margins are just absolutely full, and so that's how I can't remember I'll never remember it. I remember a few things, but I have to write all these passages down. That'll help you. And so what I have, by Matthew chapter 24 and verse 29, I have these passages just jotted down that I'm about to tell you. And so they're always there. And when I'm in a conversation with somebody and they ask me, when they talk about this chapter, and I've got it right there at my fingertips. It does help. And so the first passage with that little rabbit trail taken care of, the first passage that I want you to look at is Isaiah chapter 13. When you get to Isaiah chapter 13, we want to look at verse 10 and 11. So I'm going to give you a second to turn in your Old Testaments, if you've got your Old Testaments with you tonight. Old Testament, chapter 13 of Isaiah. And I want you to look down about verse 10 and 11. Now, before we read verse 10 and 11, though, I want you to look with me at verse 1 of chapter 13. Isaiah says this, the oracle concerning Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amoz saw. The oracle concerning Babylon. In other words, God has a word for Babylon. He's got a word for the Babylonian Empire. And here's what the word is. Listen up, Babylon. Lift up a standard on the bare hill. Raise your voice to them. Wave the hand that they may enter the doors of nobles. I have commanded my consecrated ones. I have even called my mighty warriors, my proudly exalting ones, to execute my anger. Okay. Uh-oh. This is a word for Babylon. I'm about to execute my anger. Now, look at verse 6. We'll just jump down. Here's part of that. Wail, God tells Babylon through Isaiah. Wail, for the day of the Lord is near. Now, what's he talking about? That when Jesus is coming back? He's not talking about when Jesus... They don't know who Jesus hasn't... The Israelites don't know who Jesus is yet. God hasn't brought the Messiah yet. The day of the Lord is near. That is, I'm coming for you. I am coming to execute my judgment and my anger on you for what you've done. Wail, for the day of the Lord is near. It will come as destruction from the Almighty. Therefore all hands will fall limp, and every man's heart will melt. They will be terrified. Pains and anguish will take hold of them. They will writhe like a woman in labor. They will look at one another in astonishment. Their faces are aflame. Behold, the day of the Lord is coming. This is judgment coming. Cruel with fury and burning anger to make the land a desolation. And he will exterminate its sinners from it. Okay, get ready now. Verse 10. For the stars of heaven and their constellations will not flash forth their light. The sun will be dark when it rises, and the moon will not shed its light. Thus I will punish the world for its evil and the wicked for their iniquity. And he continues this oracle against Babylon. Now, did you see that in verse 10? That's the language of judgment. This astronomical, metaphorical language of judgment. Look at it again, verse 10. The stars and the stars of heaven and their constellations will not flash forth their light. The sun will be dark when it rises. The moon will not shed its light. Does that sound familiar? It should sound familiar because that's the kind of language that you saw in Matthew chapter 24. Listen to it again. The sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky. See? It's the same type of language. That's just normal language to describe God coming in judgment on someone. Okay, back to Isaiah chapter 13, verses 10 and 11. Now, beside verse 10, I have written where it says, the stars of heaven and their constellations will not flash forth their light. I have jotted in the margin of my Bible, C34, C, take a look at it, C, S-E-E, 34, verse 4 and 5. So that tells me, okay, let me turn to chapter 34 of Isaiah, same book, Isaiah chapter 34, and look at verse 4 and 5. Now, before we get to 4 and 5, listen to Isaiah chapter 34, verse 1 and 2. Draw near, O heavens, and hear, and listen, O peoples. Let the earth and all it contains hear, and the world and all that springs from it. For the Lord's indignation is against all nations. Oh, here we go again. The Lord's indignation is against all nations. God is angry again. And he is coming against, and his wrath against all their armies. He has utterly destroyed them. He has given them over to slaughter. So their slain will be thrown out, and their corpses will give off their stench, and the mountains will be drenched with their blood. Wow. Language of judgment. And now look at the next verse. Here we go. Verse 4 and 5. And the hosts of heaven will wear away, and the sky will be rolled up like a scroll, and all their hosts will all wither away as a leaf withers from the vine. Verse 5, for my sword is satiated in heaven. Behold, it will descend for judgment upon Edom. Okay, earlier in Isaiah there, it was a judgment against Babylon. Now here in verse 5, it's upon Edom. God says, I am coming in judgment. My sword is satiated in heaven. It is ready to unleash judgment. And look at that metaphorical language, that astronomical language there in verse 4. The hosts of heaven will wear away. The sky will be rolled up like a straw. Their hosts will wither away. That's the same language that Jesus uses in Matthew chapter 24. It's just language of God coming in judgment. It's not language reserved for the second coming of Jesus. It's language that was always used throughout God's history anytime He was coming in judgment on someone. The Babylonians, the Edomites. Okay, now, beside Isaiah chapter 34 and verse 4, I've jotted another text down in the margin of my Bible so that I'll know to turn to that. And what I've jotted down in the margin of my Bible is Ezekiel 32, verse 7 and 8. Ezekiel 32, verse 7 and 8. So, let's turn to Ezekiel 32, verse 7 and 8. Now, before we read verse 7 and 8, I want you to look at verse 1 of Ezekiel chapter 32. Watch this. In the 12th year, in the 12th month, on the first of the month, the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, take up a lamentation over Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and say to him, uh-oh, that sounds ominous. Okay, Isaiah chapter 13, it was take up a lamentation against the Babylonians. Say, God's saying, I'm coming for you in judgment. And then chapter 34, the Edomites, God said, I'm coming for you in judgment. And now here in Ezekiel chapter 34, Ezekiel, take up this lamentation. I got a word that you need to send to the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Look what he says. You compared yourself to a young lion of the nations, yet you are like the monster in the seas. And you burst forth in your rivers and muddied the waters with your feet and fouled their rivers. Thus saith the Lord God, now I will spread my net over you. God's telling him, I'm coming for you. I'm coming in judgment on you. I'm holding you accountable for what you've done. And so, look at the language that he says. Verse 4, I will leave you on the land. I will cast you on the open field. I will cause all the birds of the heavens to dwell on you. I will satisfy the beasts of the whole earth with you. I will lay your flesh on the mountains and fill the valleys with your refuse. I will also make the land drink the discharge of your blood. As far as the mountains and the ravines will be full of you. And when I extinguish you, now watch this. Look here at verse 7. And when I extinguish you, I will cover the heavens and darken their stars. I will cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon will not give its light. All the shining lights of the heaven I will darken over you and set darkness on your land, declares the Lord. Same kind of language. When God comes in judgment, whether it's on the Babylonians, whether it's on the Edomites, whether it's on the Egyptians, God loves to use that language of astronomical chaos. It's the language of judgment. That's all it is. Good Old Testament metaphorical language referring to God's judgment. Okay, now, let me give you a couple more. I think you're seeing now that this language that we find in Matthew chapter 24, that's not unique language at all. And the people to whom Jesus was speaking, the disciples at this time, they're good Jews. They've heard this kind of language before. The language wasn't new to them. They've heard Isaiah. They've heard Ezekiel. And they've heard Joel. And they've heard Amos. And speaking of Joel, let's take a look there. Because that verse 7 of Ezekiel 32, what I've got written in the margin of my Bible, is Joel 2, verse 10. So let's take a look at Joel chapter 2. Turn over to Joel chapter 2. And when you get there, Joel is a book of judgment. And look at verse 1 of Joel chapter 2, one of the minor prophets. Not minor in the sense that the message isn't as important, but minor in the sense that they're smaller prophecies. Those are the minor prophets. So look at Joel chapter 2, verse 10. Look at verse 1. Joel chapter 2, verse 1. Blow a trumpet in Zion, sound an alarm on my holy mountain, let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord is coming. Surely it is near. The day of the Lord is coming. Again, he's not talking about the second coming of Jesus there. Jesus said, come in. The day of the Lord is coming, meaning God's judgment is coming. And what it says in verse 2, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick darkness, a day as the dawn is spread over the mountains, there will be great and mighty people. There's never been anything like it, nor there will be again after it to the years of many generations. And look what he says as he describes his judgment. But I want you to go down to verse 10. Before then the earth quakes, the heavens tremble, the sun and moon grow dark, and the stars lose their brightness. There it is again. Same thing over and over and over again. Now another passage that we could go to, we could actually go, if you just kind of stay right here in Joel chapter 2, go to verse 31, as he continues to talk about the day of the Lord in terms of God coming in judgment. Go to verse 30. I will display wonders in the sky and on the earth, blood, fire, columns of smoke. The sun will be turned into darkness, the moon into blood before the great and awesome day of the Lord. If you look at chapter 3 of Joel, verse 15, again, he's talking about the nations being judged. And he says in verse 15, the sun and moon grow dark, and the stars lose their brightness. The Lord rules from Zion. Now, you get the picture, don't you? You get it? It's just Old Testament language of judgment. And so when we go to Matthew chapter 24 then, and Jesus says, in those days, the same days where he says, woe to the women who are pregnant in those days. He's talking about the time when God is going to send the Roman army to Jerusalem. Just like he sent the Babylonian army to Jerusalem more than almost 600 years earlier. And just like he sent the Assyrian army to the northern kingdom of Israel back in the 8th century BC, God's about to send in the 1st century the Roman army to Jerusalem, and they are going to level Jerusalem. It is yet another example of God coming in judgment. This time the judgment is on the Jewish nation that has rejected Jesus. And that will be a sign that Jesus is who he claimed to be. Jesus is the Messiah. He is the Son of Man. Turn back to Matthew chapter 24. Let's take a look at that. Okay. So, immediately after the tribulation of those days, verse 29, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, the powers of the heavens will be shaken. We just saw that language over and over and over again in the Old Testament. Verse 30, and then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. Okay, real quickly, I want you to notice something. It doesn't say the Son of Man is going to appear. Look what it says. And then the sign of the Son of Man will appear. Oh, that's important. It doesn't say Jesus is going to appear. It says a sign of the Son of Man will appear. And so, not a personal appearance, the sign of the Son of Man. Now, here's what I want you to notice. It says that the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky. I know there's some different translations out there. Does anybody have the Old King James? Who's got the Old King James? Does anybody have it? Nobody? Do you have the Old King James? What does the Old King James say there in verse 30, right? The first part of verse 30. Okay, now listen what she said. And then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. Now notice the difference. The New American Standard said, and then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky. The King James says, then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven. The Old American Standard of 1901, very literal translation, says, let me see if I got it right here. I don't know if anybody does have that. Not many people carry that anymore. It's great Hebrew and Greek. It's awful English. But it is a very literal translation. Let me find it. American Standard. And you're going to hear what the difference is here. It says, much like the King James, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. The New American Standard translators came along and they said, a sign will appear in the sky. And so it gives people almost the impression that there's going to be this sign in the sky. Well, really, and I think if you've got the ESV, it goes back away from sky, the English Standard Version, to heaven. It's the same word for heaven. Now the way, and I'm not a Greek scholar, but the way the Greek language is, and scholars have to do some interpretive stuff here, It could mean that there's a sign in the sky, or it could mean that Jesus is in heaven. And so the King James opts for, the King James translators and the American Standard translators are saying, and then the sign will appear of the Son of Man in heaven. They're saying a sign's going to be visible then that Jesus is in heaven. And some translations make it sound like, no, there's a sign that you're going to see in the sky of the Son of Man. I think the old King James and the old American Standard is absolutely right. A sign's going to appear at that very moment. The sign's not going to be in the sky. The sign's going to appear of the Son of Man in heaven. At that moment, in other words, when God unleashes His judgment on Jerusalem, it is going to be a visible sign that Jesus is who He claimed to be. He is the Son of God, and He is reigning in heaven. That He is beside God, and that all things are under Him. It is going to be a sign of that. When the temple is destroyed, it is going to be a visible sign to everyone that the Jewish establishment has been rejected. The Jewish system is over. It has fulfilled its purpose. They have rejected the Messiah. They said, you're not the Son of Man. You're not the Messiah. You're not the chosen one. You're not the Savior. And Jesus is saying, when God comes in judgment and destroys the temple, it is going to be a sign of the Son of Man in heaven. Does that make sense? Okay. I saw a few heads go like this. As long as I got a few heads going like this, I'm okay. Alright. I wish I had a board and we can kind of look at that verse and kind of draw some things, but I think you get it. So, that's what verse 30 is essentially saying. That when all this happens, it is going to be a sign. A sign of what? That Jesus Christ is reigning in heaven. That He is who He claimed to be. He is the Messiah of God. And then it says this, and then they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky. Well, that's definitely second coming language. Well, again, keep in mind everything that we've said up to this point, verse 34, everything that Jesus has said before this, He said it's going to take place during that generation. And He's talking about what He said at the very beginning of the chapter, that not one stone is going to be left on another. And so when you see armies surrounding Jerusalem, get out. The end is near. It's going to be bad for pregnant women. It's going to be bad for nursing women. It's going to be bad if it's in the winter. It's going to be bad if it's on the Sabbath. That's not second coming. That's the destruction of Jerusalem. It's God coming in judgment. And then He borrows that great Old Testament language of judgment and He applies it to what God's doing here through the Roman army. He's bringing judgment onto the Jewish nation for their rejection of Jesus. And that's going to be a sign to everyone that Jesus Christ is in heaven. That He is who He claimed to be. And the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time left, so let me give you real quickly, look at Isaiah, real quick. I want to read you a couple of passages. Isaiah chapter 19. This same language of coming on the clouds, Isaiah chapter 19, this same language of coming on the clouds is something that we see. Again, it's one of those things that we see in the Old Testament again, in the context of God coming in judgment. Look at 19 verse 1. The oracle concerning Egypt. Here we come, another prophecy concerning Egypt. Behold, the Lord is riding on a swift cloud and is about to come to Egypt. See that language? The Lord is coming on a swift cloud and is about to come to Egypt. What's He going to do when He comes to Egypt? He is going to lay into them like a windmill on a tornado. That's what He's going to do. That's the language of judgment, God coming on a cloud. And so this continues that pattern of language, Jesus coming on a cloud. It continues that language of judgment. By the way, I want you to look at Matthew 16. This will be the last verse that we look at before we quit tonight. Matthew chapter 16. I want you to look at verse 28. Matthew chapter 16 and verse 28. Jesus is talking here about discipleship. And He says in verse 28, truly I say to you. By the way, this is one that you want to write down in the margin of your Bible right there. Where it says, we'll see the Son of Man coming. Matthew chapter 16, verse 28. Truly I say to you, Jesus says then, There are some of those who are standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in His kingdom. What in the world is He talking about? There are some standing here who aren't going to be dead. They're going to still be alive when they see the Son of Man coming in His kingdom. Wait a minute, it's been 2,000 years. Jesus hasn't come back. Was Jesus wrong? No, He wasn't wrong. There were people who were still alive who saw Jesus coming in His kingdom. It's a different coming in His kingdom. Now, ultimately, Jesus is going to come back His second coming, and He's going to consummate the kingdom. But there was another time when Jesus came, and when He came, it was a demonstration of His rule over everything. That He is in fact the King, and He is ruling. And so that's what Jesus was saying. There's going to be some who haven't tasted death until they see the Son of Man coming in His kingdom. Now, again, He's not predicting the second coming here in Matthew chapter 16 and verse 28. I think that the best understanding of that is He's tying it to the destruction of Jerusalem. There in Matthew chapter 24, when He says that people then are going to see the Son of Man coming. And so that's what this is all about. So it's not the Son of Man coming for the second time. It's the coming of the Son of Man in judgment on His enemies. All of those who've rejected Him, all those Jews who've rejected His claim of being the Messiah, when He comes and when He destroys Jerusalem, it is going to be a sign of Him coming in His kingdom. That He is the King. He is ruling on the throne. He is at the right hand of God. He is in heaven. Okay, back to Matthew chapter 24. And we end there. Oh, but we're not finished. You're right. Man, I really thought we'd get finished. Oh, but I want to take you deep. And I want you to understand this. So, you know what we're going to do tomorrow night? We're going to finish it up. No, I'm real serious. We are going to finish it tomorrow. We're going to look at then the transition, where Jesus transitions, as I said this morning in verse 36, and then He starts talking about the second coming. He switches topics now. But okay, so we're going to draw a little mark there by verse 31. I'm going to annotate it. We've got one more verse to look at. He's going to send forth the angels with a great trumpet, and they're going to gather His elect. And then we're going to talk about the second coming of Jesus. And their question about what about signs. So that's tomorrow. I have so enjoyed being with y'all. Thank you so much for your great attention and your encouragement. I hope you will come back tomorrow night. I love to study the Bible. I love to study the Bible with folks who love to study the Bible. And I know that's a lot of you. So I'm looking forward to tomorrow.